Anyone who has ever stepped into the world of personal development and or a healing journey will have heard of how important forgiveness is. Yet for most of us, this has been one of the most challenging things that we've had to do since childhood. Forgiving others, forgiving circumstances, forgiving events that didn't go the way that you wanted them to, forgiving God or the universe for feeling like it wasn't there for you at certain points. But most importantly, forgiving yourself. And on today's episode of That's So Rich, we're going to be diving into the importance of forgiveness and forgiving the past so that you can tap into the riches that await you on the other side of what you continue to hold on to. What's up, and welcome to the That's So Rich podcast, the show that's redefining wealth and helping you manifest a life that is rich in every single way. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, transformation coach, manifestation expert, and spiritual guide. And together, we're going to create your happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest life. I'm so happy you're here. Let's do this thing. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of That's So Rich. I'm so excited to dive into today's podcast episode. It felt very fitting as I just had my mom visit me in New York City, and when I get to spend time with family, it mirrors back to me so much growth that I've experienced inside of myself. And really, even just sitting in Central Park the other day, we were visiting with some friends, and one of them asked my mom, "What's the biggest change that you've seen in Kat since moving to New York City?" And my mom looked at me and she's like, "Oh my gosh, she's just so much happier. She's so much more confident. She is a lot more at peace." And none of that has solely happened just by moving to New York City. It's come through the inner work, and it's come through self-forgiveness. It's come through forgiveness for my past, for my hometown, for my parents as a whole. And when you get to spend time around family, at least when I get to spend time around family, and this is something that I've heard from so many of the women that I work with, it's the biggest mirror into where and what areas of your life you can still tap into more forgiveness. And one of the things that I always say to the women that I work with is, if you think you're healed, go spend time with your family, because they will bring up every single thing that you do not want to look at and help mirror it back to you. And I think that that's truly one of the biggest gifts that our family offers to us. And I want to preface this episode with the fact that I'm not saying any of the things that I'm going to talk about in this podcast episode to shit on my parents or to shit on my family. And in all of this, I've taken radical responsibility, because we cannot change what we are not willing to recognize and what we are not willing to own. And so when it comes to so many of the different personal development resources out there, so many different things that talk about family dynamics now and why you are the way that you are, it really just puts this blame on our parents. And I think that there's so much gross energy in that, if I'm completely honest. If you're blaming your parents still for why you are the way that you are not taking personal responsibility for your life, and you're ultimately going to continue to be kind of like a victim to that, as opposed to step into the conscious creator role in your life to be able to have, be, and do what it is that you desire. And so I'm going to talk a lot on this podcast episode about my journey of forgiving myself, forgiving my parents, forgiving my hometown, forgiving so many things from the past, because for the longest time, I just had this angst inside of myself. I was an angsty fucking teenager because I was so angry with my parents. I was so angry that I lived in my hometown. I was so angry at myself. I was so angry for so many different things. And when I really took this intentional step into my healing journey, it required me to look at those things that I held so much angst towards, that I really numbed down with substances and working a ton and all of these things that we've talked about on the podcast before. But when I finally was able to look at them and work through them and heal them, it removed the angst. And that's where this cool, calm, collected, confident version of myself has come from, is being able to forgive the past, forgive these different experiences, and have the healing come along with it. So with that being said, I said it a little bit, but we're going to talk about some of my healing journey towards forgiveness on today's podcast episode. This is a lot of parent dynamics and attachment theory and things that kind of play into our perception of the world. And with that being said, the major areas that I've had to forgive in my healing journey, my relationship to my dad, my relationship to my mom, and then also who I was and what I did when I used to drink. There was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of resentment that I held towards myself in that period of my life. But we're going to dive into some of the challenges as well as the ways that I've been able to forgive and the ways that you'll be able to forgive your past. But first, I want to kick this off with why it's so hard for us to forgive in the first place. And the reason for this being is because when something happens, something that you build resentment towards or anger or sadness or whatever it may be, some level of pain, your brain and your body wants to protect you from experiencing that again. So it develops this resistance to whatever the thing is that created that pain for you in the first place. So when it comes to a parent or a person or a situation or something that you've done in the past, and you're wanting that protection from the pain, your brain then creates this thing where it doesn't want you to forgive it because it believes that if you forgive it, then you are going to experience the same kind of pain, when that doesn't inherently have to be true and that doesn't have to be the case that happens. And just to give you an example on that, let's say that you get into a fight or a confrontation with one of your friends or somebody who's really close with you in your life, and it's this big blowout fight. Your brain and your nervous system is going to point the finger at that thing and say that that is a threat, that is danger. And in order to protect you from that danger, it doesn't want you to forgive that person, because in forgiving that person, you're opening yourself back up to potential pain and potential threats and danger that it thinks is going to literally make you die. That's the thing with our nervous systems. We have these really intense reactions to things a lot of the time because your nervous system is programmed to keep you safe. And we originally had this back when we were cavemen, where there were saber-toothed tigers and there were really life-threatening things that were out there that were trying to harm you. And we'd love to think that we've evolved a long ways, but we really haven't when it comes to these primal instincts. So even if it's just a text message that provokes something inside of you that is painful or that your nervous system deems as a threat, it's going to try to protect you from experiencing that again. So there's this resentment or lack of acceptance that is built towards that person or that experience to try and protect you from experiencing it again. So that is why it's so challenging for us to forgive in the first place. And I know for myself, until I really stepped into the work of healing my relationship with myself, working through different past traumas, working on limiting beliefs, so on and so forth, I held on to so much of the anger, sadness, resentment, and even hate that I had towards past people and experiences. And a big reason for this being is because when we do not actually give ourselves time and space to properly process what we need to forgive or what experience created pain for us in the moment, we can start to actually hold on to the cellular memory of these things on a somatic level. And when you actually are holding it on to the cellular level of your body, then you're going to continue to replay the same experiences over and over again. This is one of the biggest things I talk about on the podcast, is that when you repress something, it doesn't just become a limiting belief or something that you think about or something that you hold on to in the subconscious mind. It actually gets stored on the cellular level of your body, and that impacts your vibration, and then you'll manifest more of that experience back into your life. And so even though you don't want more of the thing that you have lack of forgiveness towards, you're actually going to manifest more of it into your life because you haven't cleared it and you haven't healed it. And for example, for me, when I hadn't healed the relationship with my dad, when I hadn't yet forgiven my dad for the lack of love and attention that he wasn't able to give me growing up, then I manifested unavailable men over and over again into my life. I pursued unavailable men because that's what felt safe to me. I didn't witness a ton of emotional love, emotional care growing up from my dad. So that's what I on a cellular level was used to. That's what my nervous system was used to. So then when I went into different dating situations or romantic situations, I always only pursued men who were unavailable, even though consciously that's not what I wanted. And once I recognized the resentment and even hate that I felt towards my dad and healed that, then I was able to forgive him. And now I no longer go for emotionally unavailable men. I actually go for high value, really great men. And that was a byproduct of being able to not only forgive my dad on a conscious level and then work on the subconscious programming of what I experienced, what I learned, what I witnessed during that time, but then also clearing the stagnant energy and emotion surrounding the lack of love that I experienced growing up, or love in the way that I wanted to be loved versus the way that he knew how to. And because of that, I was actually able to somatically clear that from the body with a coach. Because this is something I talk about on the podcast often, is that when you're stepping into these areas that are really traumatizing for you or have created a lot of pain for you, we can't always heal it by ourselves because we don't feel safe enough to do it. And I'm such a huge advocate of working with a coach, working with a therapist, working with somebody who's trained in these different things if you are wanting to actually see the transformation that you're wanting to see, because there's some things that we really just can't get to on our own. And I know from my own experience and how uncomfortable actually healing the pain and the trauma that I had associated to my relationship with my dad was, that I couldn't have gotten there by myself. And so with that, I just want to say that a lot of times people present forgiveness as this really simple thing of just saying, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, yes, I forgive you, like we did on the playground when we were kids. But it's often so much more complex than that, because there is this key component of it not just being a subconscious thing that you're holding onto, but an actual nervous system response that, if isn't processed, stores in the body and becomes something that you then actually have to heal from on the cellular level through somatics. And this is something that I dive super, super deep into inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, because when we have these crucial players in our lives that do something that we hold onto, it then warps our perception of ourselves and perception of the world. And inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, we go so deep into how to actually somatically heal those things and restore your perception of what is true for you, and that isn't clouded by this lens of resentment or pain or trying to protect yourself in some sort of way, because everything comes back to the safety that we feel inside of ourselves. And that's something that I talked about on the last podcast episode. If you haven't listened to it, is being able to create that deep internal safety, because without that deep internal safety, we continue to play out patterns that we don't necessarily want to be in, whether that be in our relationships, finances, career, within our own dynamic to ourselves, relationship to food, whatever it may be. We repeat the same things over and over again until we can actually create that sense of safety, which oftentimes actually comes from this like visceral and nervous system based safety, where you're clearing out the old energy that is stuck on the cellular level of your body. But like I said, that's something that we dive into inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, which, if you do not know what that is my signature online manifestation program that has been specifically designed to help you release the different mental, emotional, and energetic blockages that are standing in your way of experiencing more freedom, fulfillment, and abundance. This has been the most game-changing program. I have had now over 500 women come through it. And this is the exact process that not only they've taken, but I've taken to manifest the life that I love so very much, manifest all of these different things that I talk about here on the podcast. And it is so transformative, not only on the mental level of reprogramming the subconscious mind, but also diving deeper into the somatics like we talk about on this podcast episode and so many of the podcast episodes. So if you're interested, there is a link down below in the the show notes to apply to the Abundant AF Babe Academy. We're actually coming up on the 4th year of running the Abundant AF Babe Academy, or coming into, I guess, the 5th year of it. It's going to be the 4-year anniversary since I launched it in October. And I don't know how much longer I'm actually going to be running the Abundant AF Babe Academy. There's some new things on the horizon for me. And so with that being said, if you have been here listening to the podcast for quite some time and you've been like, okay, I know I want to do the Abundant AF Babe Academy someday, I'm giving you a very fair warning that I do not think I'm going to be running it in 2025. So this is your time to actually join it, because soon I'm not going to be offering this program and I'm going to be stepping into new things that I have going on, but I would love to support you before it's too late. So like I said, if this is intriguing to you, if anything that you've listened to on the podcast over the past few years has been intriguing to you, then definitely apply to the Abundant AF Babe Academy. There's limited spots available for it, and I do not know how much longer I'm going to be running it. But with that being said, let's actually dive deeper. One of the things that we really go into inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, and this has been the biggest game changer for me in terms of being able to change my perception of the world and create forgiveness, is understanding that when the subconscious mind is being formed, it is typically formed by our parents or primary caregivers through something that is called attachment theory. And when you are looking on the internal level, your mom becomes an extension of yourself. So this is the way that she made you feel. This is the way that she spoke to you. This is how she acted with you, as well as how she felt about herself, how she spoke about herself, and how she acted as a person. So when we're looking at these internal things that we experience, that we have pain or resentment or whatever it may be, a lot of the times we look into the past and we think, okay, well, when did I learn that? When did I choose that experience? But the reality is that majority of the time it's coming from your mom or your primary caregiver that was a female figure, because that's where our perception and our understanding of ourselves comes from. Whereas dad or your primary caregiver that was in the role of the father figure is an extension of the world. So that is an extension of money, relationships, God, the universe, your work ethic. All of these external things from ourselves is an extension of dad to the subconscious mind. So that's how he made you feel, how he spoke to you, how he acted with you, as well as how he felt about himself and about the world, how he spoke about himself and about the world, and how he acted as himself and in the world. So those are some really huge areas when it comes to your relationship to yourself and your relationship to the world, and things not going the way that you necessarily want them to. Oftentimes it roots back to our relationship with those two key figures and the forgiveness that we must offer them in order to energetically free ourselves from these different symptoms that we're experiencing from those past experiences with them. So I'm going to give examples from my life to help y'all kind of like see this and paint the picture of it, because I know just listening to something like this, it can be like, whoa, okay, that makes sense, but like, what the fuck does that mean? And what does that mean for my life? And I am going to dive into it, but I also want to state that aside from these two key figures or your primary caregivers, whatever that looks like for you, there's also the obvious areas of your life that you can pinpoint needs forgiveness, whether that be different past relationships or work experiences, or like in my experience when I was drinking a ton and the shit that I did when I was drinking, that was a huge area that I had to forgive myself for and release the different like resentment and guilt and shame that I had based off of the things that I did when I was drinking. But beyond that, I would say the primary areas for me that I've actually had to forgive were, like I said, my relationship to my mom and my relationship to my dad. So what did I have to heal and forgive in my relationship to my dad? There were quite a few things. If you are new to the podcast, I have a challenging or had a challenging relationship with my dad. He was an alcoholic growing up, and there was a lot of sadness that I had surrounding that, a lot of resentment, a lot of hate that I actually had surrounding that because of his lack of attention and love growing up, as well as the unpredictability from him. I didn't know how he was going to act on any given day, depending on how much he was drinking and how the alcohol was impacting him, as well as this lack mindset or victim mentality that he had surrounding a lot of different things due to his own trauma that he experienced growing up. And I know I said this earlier in the podcast episode, but I'm going to reiterate it one more time. I don't say these things out of a space of pointing the finger at my dad or pointing the finger at my parents and saying, you did this and I am this way because of you, because that wouldn't get me anywhere. That wouldn't get me anything. That would continue to keep me in the space of unforgiveness and repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. But because I've been willing to look at this and actually be able to see that my parents have done the best that they could with the information that they had, and your parents did the best that they could with the information that they had, and that this is their first time doing life as well, then you're actually able to step forward with a different energy, which is what I've done and what I did to heal my relationship to my dad. Like I was saying earlier, it was a lot of somatic healing. It was a lot of actually addressing the underlying anger, hate, rage that I had inside of myself. I remember specifically, I had a call with my life coach where I was talking about the unavailable men that I had been attracting into my life, and I was so angry. I was so sad. And as I was tapping into the energy surrounding that, and this is something that happens through the somatic experiencing, at least the somatic experiencing that I do, tapping into those past memories and emotions, what essentially happens is as you're allowing yourself to express the emotion, more memories or the core of it starts to make itself more known. And I remember just so clearly having this moment where I was like, I hate my dad, and I don't hate my dad by any means, but that was where I had to get to, and that's the emotion that I needed to actually be able to express and give myself permission to express, whether it was true or not in that moment, to clear it through the body. And that's one of the things that really set me free on the other side of this, is like truly going into the depths of this emotion, feeling it so fully, screaming, kicking, crying, getting it out of my physical body and creating space, because that's what happens as well in the somatic experiencing that I do for my clients, is you feel the depths of this emotion, because once you feel the depths of it, that energy moves up and through your body. And on the other side of that emotional experience, you actually feel the space that has been created. And in that space that has been created, it's kind of like the garden analogy that I always share with y'all, is that you're pulling all of those weeds out of the ground, you're pulling them up from the root level. And now that the root is cleared out of the ground, there's actually space inside of the ground to plant new seeds. And so as that emotional experience happened for me, and as I was able to somatically clear this from the cellular level of my body, there was more space created to then plant the seed of acceptance for my dad, for what he's been through, for his own experiences, for his behavior, for the alcohol. And it's not excusing it, but it was a level of acceptance where I could look at him and say that I don't need to change you. I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to do things differently. This isn't about me. This is about your experience, and I can love you in your experience even if I don't fully understand it. And through that level of acceptance and through that lens of being able to bring more acceptance to it, then it gave me the opportunity to, with time and with consistency, show up to those challenging moments where I was frustrated with him or a behavior or whatever it may be, and look at it through the lens of love versus through the lens of wounding and pain and wanting to be validated in my wounding and pain. Because again, things that we often are looking for forgiveness within are things that never had to do with us in the first place, especially when it comes to our parents or primary caregivers and their own dynamic in the world. As kids, we take it on and we think that they're acting that way because of us, when in reality, it never had anything to do with us in the first place. And you're just creating more pain from that experience by saying that it is, as opposed to creating this level of acceptance of like, okay, I can't change this. I don't have to love this, but it's not my responsibility, and I can love this person anyways, even if I don't understand it. So that was a major thing for my relationship to my dad. And then with my relationship to my mom, some of the things that I had to heal and forgive in my relationship to my mom primarily was the way that she talks about herself, talks about her body, has this lack of confidence from time to time that really I saw reflected back in the way that I talked about myself, the way that I had this lack of confidence inside of myself, because for the longest time I was like, all of the issues in the world that I have are related to my dad and nothing's related to my mom. But as I dove deeper into the healing work, I really saw that she really didn't speak very highly of herself. And she had put the relationship with my brother or my dad kind of, it felt like ahead of me because she was worried about them and she was never worried about me. She always believed that I was going to be okay no matter what, which I formed resentment and sadness and anger towards her surrounding. But again, as I step back into this place of they are living life for the first time as well, they inherited everything. Everything is a learned behavior. Then I was able to see that this was something that she picked up on from people in her past as well, her primary caregivers, her parents, their primary caregivers, their parents, so on and so forth, all the way down through this lineage, that these are just generational curses. These are just things that they've had to experience that I'm now experiencing because I'm the person who's actually going to break this cycle. And so again, same thing, somatic healing, being able to look at it through the lens of love, being able to shift the perspective on it has been so powerful for me within these different things, and creating that level of acceptance for my parents as they are. Because like I was talking about earlier, when it comes to our subconscious mind and the way that we perceive the world through attachment theory, is that your mom being an extension of yourself. For me, looking at those past experiences of my mom speaking poorly about herself, her lack of creativity, the way that she feels when she looks in the mirror, so on and so forth, that was my internal experience for such a long time. I would look in the mirror and I would do nothing but judge myself and say mean things to myself, which then resulted in a lack of confidence in the world and the way that I showed up and the way that I thought other people perceived me because of this internal experience. And again, mom becomes an extension of self. Whereas when I had this unhealed relationship with my dad, then I believed that making money was really hard, that I was going to have to prove myself, that I was going to have to work harder than everybody else, that no man was ever going to love me, that friends didn't actually like me, that things were just kind of clouded with this energy of lack because that was his experience. That was the energetic signature of his experience. And when I then stepped into the role of forgiveness for both of these people, for both of my parents, and worked on healing those different things, then my internal experience, there was space created for me to choose what I actually wanted it to be, which was confidence and belief and love and acceptance majority of the time. And through giving that to myself, I've also been able to extend that over to my mom and look at her in this way of, oh, look at this radiant, beautiful, confident, incredible woman who is doing the most amazing things in the world just by being who she is, as well as extending that over to my dad and looking at him and being like, wow, he really as well was doing the best that he could with the information that he had. He's shown up and he's made shit happen despite all of the trauma and all of the hardship that he's been through, because man, that man has been through hell and back. And by being able to offer that acceptance and that understanding to him, it's then changed my work ethic and my relationship with money, my relationship with other people, my relationship with how I perceive the world, where it's not not so hard. Money comes to me easily. People love me. I don't have to prove my worth to people. I get to exist in the world just by being, and it really comes through this energy of forgiveness. And I know that this podcast episode is a little different than some of the forgiveness stuff that you've heard out there before, but I think that that's probably because a lot of the forgiveness stuff is very cliche and it doesn't go that deep. It basically just says to you, like, you need to forgive these people so you don't carry the weight of it into your future. Yes, 100%, but there's so much more beyond that, where it's really the fact that your internal experience and your external experience is a byproduct of what you experienced energetically with your parents or primary caregivers. And if you do not forgive the past in that way with them, then you're going to continue to experience this really challenging internal experience and or really challenging external experience with work, with money, with relationships, with how you perceive God, the universe, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Also, excuse these sirens. Actually, we're going to pause for a second. Y'all, New York City's so fucking loud. I just had to wait for like 5 minutes to start recording again because there were so many sirens. But we're back. And so all of that to say, forgiveness is so much deeper than it just saying, hey, I forgive you, or looking at something and saying, hey, I forgive you. And I'll also say that I know I've talked a lot about just acceptance and somatics, not just, that's huge. Those two things that I've talked about, and what I encourage you to do with that is, if this resonates with you, truly seek someone that can help you with it. Like I said, this is something that we go very, very deep into inside of the Abundant AF Babe Academy, and I highly encourage you to apply. But if it's not the Academy and this resonates with you, find something else. And I will say that within this, there's also other ways to pursue forgiveness through EFT tapping, through different healing modalities out there. But what's been possible for me since forgiving has been so life-changing. I feel light. My mental space isn't taken up by anger or fear. I have incredible relationships with both of my parents now. I love my parents so much. I feel comfortable. I feel confident sharing anything and everything with them. They're so supportive of me and what I'm doing because I've been able to communicate the fact that this is all just healing. We're all just making each other better people by sharing our stories. And I energetically have so much space for abundance because I've let go of all of the shit that I didn't want to carry around. I didn't want to carry it whatsoever. But like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast episode, when you do not feel safe to let it go, you'll carry it with you. And the only way you'll be able to actually let it go is by healing that part of yourself that doesn't feel safe enough to release it. When you feel safe enough to release it, you will finally let it go and have so much more space for the experiences, for the relationships, for the career, the finances, for everything that you want versus what you've seen and what you feel comfortable with, even if it's not what you want. Just like we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast episode, with that really just being a safety mechanism. Manifestation and you creating the life that you desire for yourself every single time is going to root back to safety. And you forgiving your past is what allows you to feel safe to move forward with your future. You deserve to feel safe about what you've been through so that you can feel safe moving forward into what is to come for you. And that is what forgiveness can offer you. And one last thing that I want to offer to you in this is that I know we've talked a lot about forgiving your parents or primary caregivers, but don't forget to forgive yourself as well, because we are so much harder, so much more critical, so much nastier to ourselves than we are to anybody else on planet Earth. What originally may have started as a learned behavior or a learned way of being from a parent or a primary caregiver is amplified by the way that we then take that on and use it against ourselves. And that's not you, that's not your higher self leading that. That's the ego. That's this internal like safety protector. And again, I know that sounds really bizarre. That's this internal piece of you that's like, stay small, be small, do not believe in yourself or your potential, because if you step into your potential, then you're stepping into the unknown, and the unknown feels way less safe than this experience of internal beat up. But do not forget to forgive yourself. That is one of the most major things that I see with a lot of the women that I work with, is that they're going through, they're doing the work, they're forgiving people, they're forgiving past experiences, and they're like, okay, Kat, but there's still something that's off. There's still something that's not working. And I'm like, yes, sis, did you forgive yourself? And they're like, look at me and they're like, oh shit. It's like, yeah, you have to forgive yourself as well. There's so many things, like I said, there's still things that I'm forgiving myself for. And to be able to go back and look at those different things is really uncomfortable. And that's, like I said, why I suggest working with somebody to be able to go through these different experiences, because oftentimes left to our own devices, that discomfort is so strong that the ego is going to try to just get you to push it down, bury it even further until you can't bury it any longer. And so actually taking this proactive approach of having somebody who can be there with you and help provide that safety until you know how to give it to yourself is so key to actually move forward in the healing process in the way that you want to. So one last call to apply to the Abundant AF Babe Academy. If that is something that really resonates with you, I cannot recommend it enough. This work has completely changed my life. It has changed the lives of so many others. And like I said, you deserve to feel free from your past so that you can actually create the future that you desire. And it is not until we free ourselves from our past that we have the space to create the futures that we want. So that is all that I have for you on today's podcast episode. If you want to join the Abundant AF Babe Academy, click the link down below in the show notes to apply, and I'll chat with you on the next one. I'm sending you all of my love.